Welcome along to this, the 10th IoTSF monthly webinar of 2023. We are now just days away from the annual IoTSF conference at London's IET on Tuesday, the 7th of November. The full list of speakers and the agenda are available right now via iotsfconference.com. If for some reason you've still not got your ticket, please act now. On the day, the registration desk opens bright and early at 8:30 a.m. and the event itself kicks off at 9 a.m. The nearest tube station is Covent Garden. It's then just a 2 or 3 minute walk to the IET, where you will then find cybersecurity utopia. Right, on our first topic today, it's going to be about physical unclonable functions, otherwise known as PUFs. Shahram Mossayebi is an MSc in Information Security and a PhD in Post-Quantum Cryptography, both from Royal Holloway, University of London. Shahram worked as a self-employed cybersecurity consultant for a few years before spotting a large gap in the market around IoT cybersecurity. He then founded Quantique, who also happened to be a platinum sponsor at the 2023 IoTSF conference. If that were not enough, Shahram is also going to be a speaker at the conference on the subject of the future of IoT security. So for avoidance of any doubt, today's talk on PUFs is a totally different presentation to the one that Shahram we'll be talking about at the IET. So without further ado, Shahram, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you very much to IoT Security Foundation for having me. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon if you are in Europe, and have a great time wherever else you are. Let me share my screen and start. Just quickly, Quantique, we are an IoT security company based in London. We are about 7 years old, and we are providing typical app security for any connected device through 2 products that we have. One is a silicon IP, is a quantum tunneling PUF, and the other product is a SaaS software called QuarkLink that provides and helps us to provide this typical app security. Essentially, in a nutshell, we provide the root of trust at the device level, silicon level. Then we help with secure boots or secure provisioning at the kind of OEM side on the supply chain. And then on the other side of the market, consumer side, we provide device management, security, device management, and features such as firmware update over the year. Today, I'm going to talk about PUFs and kind of going to share some of the experience that we have had in the past 5-6 years, talking to many customers across the globe. Obviously, we are very excited about PUF and we see huge value for the ecosystem. But at the same time, there are some challenges in adopting PUFs, which I would like to share with you today. I'm going to start with the basics first and kind of explain the background before getting to share with you our findings. To just recap what a PUF is, the best source is Wikipedia. So we define PUF as a physical object that for a given input and conditions provides a physically defined digital fingerprint output that serves as a unique identifier. Essentially about 2001, there was this academic paper that says there are some device variability at each electronic component, and that can be harnessed by different means. And once it's harnessed, it kind of gives you this kind of fingerprint inside each device that potentially can be used for a source of randomness and could have security applications, which is a really, really cool niche idea. And since then, it started to grow. If you go through that period of the past, I don't know, 10, 15 years, 20 years, and look at the literature, there are different definitions of PUF. The very first category that people started designing and defining PUFs were strong versus weak. To just quickly explain, on the strong side, the idea was, can we have this kind of unlimited challenge response pairs per PUF that is inside the device? Basically, to create a database that then later on we can challenge the PUF, and we can verify the response from the PUF. The other model was kind of a weak, called the weak PUF, which essentially says, here's a fingerprint constructed from a number of random string bits, and you either can turn all of it into one cryptographically secure key, or you can basically read different part of this fingerprint each time and create the same keys. As it turned out throughout the literature and the research that been done on PUF, things that were called strong PUF that essentially use as a challenge response function turned out to be not so strong. Pretty much, as far as I know, there are all sort of, whether it's a machine learning attack or other ways of attacking strong PUFs. So didn't get much traction in whether industry or in academia. However, weak PUF turned out to be more stronger than that the name suggests, and there are more applications around that. And most, as far as I know, most of the commercial PUFs that are out there are different forms of a weak PUF. But essentially, the idea of PUF was, once you have this randomness internally, then you have these features such as uniqueness and unforgeability, and resistance against tampering, and being able to reproduce the string without storing it inside memory. So these were kind of main features of the PUF, which are very valuable, and usually is either impossible or hard to achieve that with current means or previous means that keys were produced or injected inside each device. So again, very exciting concept, and there are many ways of doing that essentially. So any way that you can measure some sort of device variability that is fixed for whatever component that you are using, you can create a PUF. So these are what you see on the screen. These are what, as far as we are aware, the current commercial PUFs out there that people are either selling or integrating, from kind of delay-based ones or SRAM ones that are the most popular or famous one, to our own PUF, which is a quantum tiling PUF measuring the gate leakage of transistors, for instance. These are all different forms of weak PUFs that we know out there being used. But the other aspect of PUFs is what are the applications, what are they good for, and they actually vary. So it could be used, PUFs can be used for very simple application, such as just producing a part serial number, instead of injecting them and like tracking them like that, just extracting the serial number from the device, to protecting against counterfeiting for the device, get more serious on the security features that it could provide, and ultimately it could be essentially an unforgeable device identity that can be used as a root of trust to create that anchor of trust between any application stack that runs on the device and the actual hardware. And that's kind of the ultimate goal, most exciting features of a PUF, which we are so very excited about. And our whole thesis in the company, Quantique, is built around that, how we can utilize that so everyone on the supply chain from chip to the cloud side can benefit from it, essentially. So many different type of application out there, but they don't necessarily need to have the same level of security, essentially. So if you are using just for serial number, for whatever reason, that's the purpose that you have, you probably don't need security around your PUF. Is more about whether PUF as a component inside your chip is reliable enough to just give you that kind of unique string for that part, essentially. So a lot of other security bits that you need to look at and take care of when you use 𝗏 as a root of trust. You won't need it when you look at it as a serial number, for instance. And that's one of the aspects that we saw in the market, especially early days, that created a bottleneck for people to adopt 𝗏. So first of all, people had seen papers around attacks on different 𝗏s, mostly very strong 𝗏s, and they just took it as, okay, we cannot trust 𝗏s, and they just shut the door on any 𝗏 application or 𝗏 implementation. And the other aspect that we realized, which comes to this, was a confusion around, well, okay, I also can build a 𝗏 internally, and we want to use it for I don't know, serial number or anti-counterfeiting. But then when you were talking to them about, okay, the value of the 𝗏 as a root of trust, they couldn't really understand why they cannot use theirs also for root of trust without grasping the huge amount of work that needs to go to it to make sure this 𝗏 can be used as a root of trust, essentially, with considering that more security required around that sort of implementation. So that was kind of one side of one part of the bottleneck that we saw in the past 5-6 years. The confusion around how to trust the 𝗏 and what type of 𝗏s are out there, and then the other thing was not invented here. We can just build the 𝗏 and we can use it for anything that is out there and anything that we want, without realizing all the necessary steps to prove the 𝗏 is suitable for that application, essentially. And then that takes me to the second aspect. So I'm just going to concentrate more on the root of trust type application, because that's where we see the most value, and that's us and most of the other 𝗏 companies out there are basically pushing to sell their 𝗏s and interact with their customers to add the most value for the customers and the supply chain downstream. So in that case, as a root of trust, 𝗏 essentially is a small component of the overall root of trust block, but it's a very, very important one. And because of that, it plays a massive role. So because of that, it requires to gain huge amount of trust for the person who wants to integrate it, essentially. And currently, one of the big challenges to gain that trust is the fact that there is no proper framework defined out there, or there is no proper standards defined out there for, let's say, 𝗏 being the root of trust use cases that says, okay, these are the different bits that needs to be taken care of, and define benchmark, etc. There has been some work around. So for instance, there is an ISO around 𝗏s, but when it comes to the security side of it, it merely kind of stops at the point of just mentioning high entropy. And when it comes to actually testing that entropy and testing the randomness of it, etc., they just rely and mention the generic randomness tests that are out there and says, yeah, these are like 5 randomness tests out there, run them, and hopefully you get some good results and you can trust the randomness of your 𝗏. That generally not the case, because pretty much all the randomness suites that are out there being defined for random number generators. And random number generator is a totally different application from a weak 𝗏, which has a limited amount of reproducible randomness, but the randomness is fixed. The type of tests are not fully suitable. Usually they require a huge amount of data and random bits to go through to be effective. So none of the randomness suites, some of the tests are kind of useful, but not all of them. And essentially, you don't have a proper way of our specific tests that are suitable for 𝗏s. So for instance, when it comes to 𝗏s, you also need to take into consideration the spatial and geometry of the devices that have been used to create the 𝗏 application. Usually those spatial and spatial geometry also could be cause of correlation between different dies. with different wafers even, and currently with randomness tests in test suites that we have, we cannot measure that. And these are some serious questions that some well-informed customers are asking, and they want evidence that whatever PUF you're selling them can show resistance and qualification towards those sort of tests. The other challenge that we saw from a customer point of view is even if people want to cross the randomness suite that people are running, still there are some confusion and it's not fully clear whether, for instance, if this test was run on the actual raw bits that came out of the PUF or was on the process data, where they applied on the data that was gathered through the PBT, process corners, voltage, threshold, temperature, these kind of things. These are also not clear what parameters were used in those randomness tests. So we found that as you share more information about how you done those tests, you obviously gain more trust from the customer and make them feel better about trusting your IP and your PUF IP. The other interesting conversations that we had, which kind of keep people kind of on edge whether to adopt the PUF or not, is whether the PUF on its own is secure against side channel attack, whether the actual main component or primitive that were used to create that PUF application stands different type of side channel attacks, etc., or how hard it is to protect it against side channel attacks and so on. And ultimately, once you show all these things to gain the trust of your customer, at the end of the day, it comes to the integration of the IP into an SoC, for how easy or hard it is to integrate the IP. Then from reliability, just IP characteristic point of view, again, whether that's a suitable IP to integrate, and then also once it's integrated, once it's fabricated, how do you know it's actually functioning well? Do you have built-in self-tests so we can, without leaking any randomness and valuable information at the wafer level, those IP can be tested and says, yeah, okay, this is functioning well, and you can trust it moving forward. But these are more kind of technical bits that we saw in order to either basically to show or the customer ask to gain trust in the PUF applications generally. And then even when you pass these barriers, there was another interesting bit that we kind of encountering, which might be the most popular one, and that are eFuses. So essentially, the customer says, well, if security is important, something like root of trust or a key that is embedded inside the device is important. So we use eFuses. We just burn the keys, and that will do the job, which is fair enough. Again, depending on what type of application you want to achieve, you can surely do that. However, once you go with eFuse instead of something like a PUF, there are some key elements that, from application point of view, for your customers could be very important. And those are things from unforgeability aspect, the tamper resistancy, the fact that you can have multiple unique dynamic keys. Keys can be reset in some cases, in some type of PUF keys that has a lot of value in some end applications versus keys being fixed. But most importantly, once you have a PUF, you take the human element out of the whole cybersecurity chain. And that's a very, very valuable, important thing to do, given that usually the human element is the weakest link in the whole supply chain, in the whole cybersecurity chain. And you essentially enable to move faster and better towards having zero trust, zero touch type architecture that, again, have more application and value for the end user closer to the cloud side of it. So essentially, what we are seeing on the ecosystem is, to just quote Henry Ford, is it seems that most of the semiconductor companies, chip designers, are looking to have a faster horse rather than having a car. hope that was helpful. And that is from me. Thank you.
Shahram Mossayebi, thank you very much indeed. Shahram of Crypto Quantique.